bye week. Trade deadline just occurred, so there's a ton of news. Me and my main guy here, Suneil, are going to break it all down for you right after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the 49ers RedZone podcast. But we've got a special guest today. We've got Suneil up in the building. He's up in his with that nice dress shirt on. He's up in a different state. How you doing, my guy?
I'm good, brother. It's actually like just a long sleeve type things that that compress.
That keep you warm, pretty much, huh?
Yeah, it's out here on the East Coast. It's fall, so it's a little bit cold. So us Californians aren't always the best when it comes to cold weather. So.
Oh my God, the amount of people that complain when I say like 50s and 40s are cold, you know what I mean? But we getting used to it here. So yeah, that's that. But enough about the weather. Obviously, the 49ers, a team that always has news attracted to them. We can talk about the Rams game, but first we got to start with what happened recently. The bye week, it's not a bye week for us because the trade deadline just occurred. 49ers made one move at the trade deadline, but we're very active. Let's start with that one move. The 49ers traded away running back Jeff Wilson Jr. for a 2023 fifth-round pick to the Miami Dolphins. This kind of ensures that they got something for a player that is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. What are your initial thoughts really on this move?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think Jeff Wilson had this team. The reason being is, we still don't know if Elijah Mitchell can stay healthy. Mitchell does go down again. Obviously, having CMC there makes that a little bit easier. But second back, Jeff Wilson played very well for the team in the first half of the season. So it kind of is a little bit, but I think you mentioned it, right? Jeff Wilson Jr. is in the last, it isn't signed through this. So you're able to get an asset for him. And I think that the 49ers did right by Jeff Wilson in this trade, giving him an opportunity to go to a team where he'll have more opportunities he's familiar with a coaching staff that he's familiar with, so that he has his best opportunity next season. I think that played a role because I do think the 40 have shown a propensity to do right by their players, and in situations like to kind of help their career out the best way. That it is going to be sad. I think Jeff Wilson Jr. was a locker room favorite. He obviously was for the 49ers, but obviously when you have CMC and you have Elijah Mitchell coming back, he would drop to the third. He's just there as safety net, not an actual play on the team. So getting a fifth round, we know what the 49ers can do with the fifth round draft pick. They've gotten role players and starters from the fifth round. So it's a value pick for the 49ers for sure.
No, definitely. And I mean, when you talk about Jeff Wilson Jr. and that fifth round pick, first of all, with the compensation, something I said yesterday, and that's something that should be noted. This is great compensation for a player of Jeff Wilson's caliber at his position. James Robinson, a player 2 years younger than Wilson and a player who has 1,000-yard season under his belt in his career, was traded for a sixth round pick. That's a conditional fifth round pick. That in itself is, well, we don't know if it's going to convey into a fifth or a sixth. So Wilson really got traded for more than what James Robinson was for, and also what Nyheim Hines got traded for yesterday. Hines was traded for similarly to Robinson, a conditional sixth, and Buffalo gave up Zach Moss as well. So it was a good trade in terms of compensation. The question obviously being, can the 49ers sustain health with their top two running backs? But another thing to note, the 49ers would have had to move on from one of their running backs within the next 2 weeks because they're activating Elijah Mitchell from IR, and you're not going to carry 5 running backs and 4 tight ends on your roster. John Lynch acknowledged it really in his press conference yesterday that was an issue. That one guy was going to be the odd man out, and it was Wilson, who had coincidentally pretty much requested a trade from the 49ers when they moved from McCaffrey. So connecting the dots makes sense for the 49ers to move him, and it's a good move to get the capital, which is more than you'd anticipate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but let's just be negative Nancy's for a little bit, right? We made one good move with Jeff Wilson Jr., but we didn't make another move, and that was for Commanders defensive tackle Daron Payne. 49ers were engaged in talks. Obviously, nothing materialized into something significant, but they did call in on Daron Payne, or call in on the Commanders about Daron Payne. Should the 49ers have pushed all in and gotten Daron Payne to pretty much go all in for this season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that position 49ers have, ever since Armstead has gone out, the line, it hasn't been as dominant as it was earlier in the season when Armstead was playing. A lot more, Bosa isn't having the same type of success as season, because offensive lines and offensive schemes are just on Bosa because the other players aren't able to, get the kind of type of attention that a guy like Armstead was able to warrant when this defensive line was playing very, very well. I definitely think they did need to bring somebody in, and it would be nice. Obviously, it would have fit in great. Obviously, the 49ers have had some history with the maybe they aren't too happy with how that last trade went because it seems like a fluke, what Trent Williams ended up turning out for what 49ers for Trent, and maybe that was playing in the back, making sure that they get the most. And I'm sure I don't necessarily think we're not going all in. I think that they're gonna overpay, and obviously right now they do have an abundance of picks in the league. So you already made your big splash with CMC to be you and that's right. We're forgetting, even though he's not playing, you used a lot of your assets to get Trey Lance, assets to get CMC. They don't really have too many more assets to be able to go in. I think they tried their best, but they just didn't have a package that was appealing enough. Trigger.
Yeah, and I think that last part that you just said, not enough, is the reason that this move didn't happen. Wrote an article on it today on why the 49ers didn't trade for Daron Payne, and that number one reason was the compensation. The Washington Commanders were definitely looking for 2023 draft capital, which the 49ers just simply didn't have. They don't have a first-round pick this year because of the Lance trade. They don't have a second-round pick this year because of the McCaffrey trade. It was expected that the Commanders would field offers for a second-round pick in return for Daron Payne. 49ers just didn't have that, and while they could offer a third and multiple fifths, I think the Commanders probably wanted a little more if they were going to mortgage this season and give up a player of Payne's caliber, because they could franchise tag him in the offseason and make another move where they might have a little more time and leverage in that situation. But the 49ers probably offer 2024 draft compensation, and if I'm the Commanders, I wouldn't accept that, at least if I'm their GM. Why? Because GM Martin Mayhew there might be on the hot seat over the next 2 years. That might be an issue for him, right? Because he might be getting draft capital, mortgaging himself this year, which gives the ownership a reason to fire him within the next 2 seasons. And then that capital is used by the next GM, which isn't favorable in the short term for him and his future, and him and Ron Rivera's future. So I understand why the Commanders didn't make it. As for the 49ers, when you look contractually, you're not going to pay 3 defensive linemen big time money. Bosa's getting an extension this year. Armstead's on significant money. Are you going to pay Daron Payne, a free agent at the end of the year, $20 million, $17 million, or how much ever you pay him? I don't think that that's feasible for roster building, even with the salary cap spike, especially with the way that you've been able to facilitate the development of several defensive linemen over the past couple of years. So to me, I think it made sense not to move on or not to go after Daron Payne. But I have to ask this question as a preface. Speaking more generally, do you think the 49ers missed out on moving for anybody at the trade deadline? Do you think they should have done more in a different capacity?
I mean, it's kind of hard to see. You just brought in CMC and you saw what CMC did to this offense. So, I mean, I think at this enough, we're really spoiled as 49er fans because, they just got a player who, with what other team did that? You know what I mean? To get a pro level player that can instantly make an impact at a position of need. I think they do now. I think they have solutions for what there's still solutions out there in free agency, play meaningful roles. And I think the 49ers knew that. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see defensive line be brought in here over the bye week to help defensive line, especially if, Kinlaw is not going to be able to play kind of wishy-washy or unable to stay healthy throughout the season. So I think it's more strategic than anything else, but I don't miss out, man. You got CMC, and we saw what he was able to do against the Rams. So in my
I think that's fair. And before I continue, just real quick, want to give a shout out to everybody that's in here so far. Raphael 5629ers, got to give a shout out to you. JDLR, thank you for tuning in, as well as Niner Gang Wolfcast, a nice podcast over there. Mariah, always thank you for tuning in, as well as ST85. All of you guys, thank you for tuning in. And for those of you guys that are watching, greatly appreciate if you were able to subscribe. Just give this channel a subscribe, like the video, and help brother out. But talking about the topic at hand, talking about if the 49ers missed out on the trade deadline, I personally believe so. Still thought that there were certain moves this 49ers team could have made at two specific positions, cornerback or at the defensive line. They were looking for an interior defensive lineman, obviously looking to strike big with Daron Payne. I would have been fine with a rotational level player that was healthy. Right now, the 49ers have been a little they've been a little brought down to earth at that position. The running game has, or at least the defense in terms of allowing rushing yards, has been a little wary over the last couple of games. Kevin Givens, Hassan Ridgeway, Kerry Hyder have done a good job over the year, but you'd hope that, you have a little more depth. I was looking at some players, Rasheem Green, Justin Jones of Houston and Chicago, respectively. I thought that they both could have been solid additions. Seeing if one of the players, or really somebody in that level, would have been a nice pickup for a 5th or 6th round pick, and you essentially get a chance to develop them if they have extra years of team control. 49ers stayed put. I wouldn't be surprised if they go into the free agent market. Guy like an Ndamukong Suh, definitely would welcome him into the team on a 1-year deal, especially if you're trying to make that push. But right now, they didn't make a move, and that kind of leaves them less insulated at certain positions.
Well, the 49ers are getting healthy over this bye week. Armstead is said to be coming back, and boy is coming back too, Mr. Willis. So I think that they are getting some depth there at the defensive line position. Maybe they just saw that, and like you mentioned, we both mentioned it. There is some options there in free agents, even though the 49ers have a lot of I think that the 49ers do picks maybe more than other teams because of how much success they have drafting there. If you look at just, Samuel Womack, Drake Greenlaw, and Talana Hufanga on defensive side, that were all 5th round draft picks. So 5th. So you look on the other side, Spencer Burford, Elijah Mitchell's team does really well picks. So I think that they probably trust that they could players that are going to be impact players on this team from those picks. And the reality is, these because more than likely this off season they are going to lose some players just because of not ability to pay everybody.
Yeah, no, I think you do bring up a good point on the draft capital, and that they've been able to strike Pater. Lynch himself admitted it. They've been able to strike Pater in those rounds, so it is beneficial to have the extra capital. And obviously, you might need it more than before, because you're going to have free agents this year that you might not have enough cap space to bring back. Azeez Al-Shire might be a name that we're talking about. Emmanuel Mosley might be a name that we're talking about. Some members along the defensive line. I think Charles Omenihu is due for an extension. Samson Ebukam is a free agent at the end of the year. There are just a couple of names. You have a lot of players that could be due for extensions or set to hit free agency. And so it's a good point that you do have extra capital in which you have flexibility to make moves going up or down in the draft, and being able to insulate your roster that way. But enough about the trade deadline. It's now past. 49ers do have their roster constructed in front of them. Let's look back on the most recent game, the game that I kind of deemed as a somewhat of a must-win game for the 49ers. They did end up winning it, defeating the Rams. What were your initial takeaways kind of from the game?
Look, Rohan, have we ever felt, or when have we ever thought that the 49ers could put up 30 plus Samuels not be playing in that game? I never in a million years dreamed that was capable of or possible of happening, but it can happen when you have a guy like CMC. Takeaway was CMC, a triple threat, being able to throw for a touchdown, catch a touchdown. I mean, that is insane to have that kind of ability. And then he came out and said, I left some on the table. Like, he said he had more out there that my biggest takeaway, obviously, number one is CMC. Number two is Brandon Ayuk. Another very, 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 very solid game. He's making the most of his targets. He's putting together a season where he's on pace to get something like 80,000 yards, close to 8 or 9 touchdowns. Like, he's putting together a very, very good season. Much hoopla and praise, you know what I mean? Like, he's kind of, under the radar guys like obviously CMC, Deebo, Kittle, but Ayuk is once again being very, able to, make some big plays when plays needed to be made. So I was actually at the game. That was on the field.
You were.
Off the field. There's no such thing as Rams fans. No such thing. Like, they looked like they were away, and the amount of red that was there, amount of 49ers, a poster that I tweeted, that there was an actual post fan was saying, Rams fans were wearing 49er jerseys because just to like kind of make up for the fact that it was all red in there. They funneled they can't be louder than the 49er fans in there. It's truly Levi's South. It was a 49er game at Levi's at SoFi. I've never been to one at Levi's. Like, I was at Levi's South. Like, there's I didn't see any Rams fans there. It was pretty funny.
That's the biggest takeaway of it all. No Rams fans. I mean, we've seen the pictures about how it's like I saw the ticker picture that Steph posted where it's a sea of red and then it says this is the Rams house. It was freaking hilarious. But overall, I mean, like you said, the 49ers this was an important win, and this was a dominant win at that, 31-14, and I think this was really the cleanest in terms of execution that we've seen in a half for the 49ers. That second half was really, really important because the 49ers have not played well in the second half. They've always played well off scripted drives, have fallen off in terms of execution after that. That wasn't the case. The 49ers didn't need their defense to win this game, although they were pretty good for the majority of the game. Instead, their offense was able to conjure up 31 points while the defense didn't force a turnover. So it was really 31 full offensive points and a strong second half in which execution was there on all three fronts: offensive line, quarterback, and the skill position players. So it's an important thing. The only question is, can the 49ers be consistent? Because they have not been consistent in a single 2-game stretch this year. They're only 4-4, and now they face off against the Chargers coming off a bye week. They're going to get healthy players, which means that margin of, or really the margin for excuses is going to decrease because you're going to have your best players out there. Can they be consistent, and can they continue to execute when those top guys are on the field? Because if not, then the 49ers are going to have to look at themselves in the mirror and understand that this could be a longer season than they anticipated.
Yeah, and to answer your question, be consistent. I think the schedule plays in their favor. Do that. So I think as far as strength of schedule, they have the fourth easiest schedule any team in the league. And if you look at some fun facts, some stats that I looked up, Niners have put up 27 plus points 3 times this season. 2 of them they put up those points again were bottom 10 as far as defenses, points bottom 10 as far as defenses that were allowing. So they're defenses that are allowing the most points. Out of the 9 games that they're going to play in the second half of the season are also when it comes to points allowed. So this team seems to maximize that are weaker, and they are going up against in 7 of their 9 games they're going to be going offenses. So they have a great opportunity with the strength of schedule that they plus CMC being a new addition to that offense. It looks like repeat kind of from what they did last season and go on a really strong run this season.
Yeah, I think that could be the case. And in a way, if it does, it's a pattern, right? The 49ers, obviously, with a strong second half last year, 7-2 before the playoff run, they have the momentum going into this game. And that kind of leads me into the schedule, because the 49ers have several home games, and the farthest they travel towards the West, I believe, in this entirety of this second half of the schedule is Arizona. They have a home game stretch where they face the Chargers, I think, in week 10, Mexico City in a neutral site in week 11, and 3 straight home games. So I ask you, do you think the 49ers have a favorable second half schedule?
Yeah, I mean, I just mentioned why too. So I think that they're obviously they left over, and more than the home and away games, there's really like play different, whether it's home or away. I think they in their level of play, no matter where they're at, but it's the level of defense that they play as far as this offense looking good. I mean, the defense when they're healthy, right? I think obviously the Kansas City game was really bad, and then some people say the Chicago game and the Atlanta game. To me, I think that was circumstances. Then the actual defense was terrible. But as far as if this offense is able to score 27 plus points per game, it makes the defense, it's a lot easier for this team to win. And I mentioned that 7 out of them are bottom 10 points allowed. So the 49ers have every opportunity to really, and I think with CMC there and them getting healthy, they can definitely make Jimmie might get a lot of credit from the national media, but I think it's going to be a lot of circumstance goes on a run. And if they're hot going into the playoffs, you never know what could happen.
Yeah, I think when we talk about the schedule, I think it's going to be, in a way, it's very intriguing to me, because I thought the first half of the schedule would be the easier part in a way. You face Carolina, you face Atlanta, Chicago, you face Seattle. Going into the season, I thought that those would be four fairly not simple, but fairly relatively easy wins compared to the remainder of the schedule. 49ers went 2-2 in those games, and they lost. Yeah, they lost to Chicago, they lost to Atlanta, and as a result, they're 4-4 right now instead of 6-2. Now they have beaten some interesting teams, right? They've beaten the Rams, they've beaten the Seahawks. They did lose to the Chiefs, but they are now 4-4. But now when we look at the second half of the schedule and how the teams have played, it does seem more favorable than before. The Chargers haven't played as well as you'd expect them maybe to. The Buccaneers have struggled this year. The Dolphins have been up and down. You know, you've seen their stretches where they faced off really well in the beginning of the year, but came down to earth a little bit, hovering around 500. The Cardinals have had their struggles both on offense and defense, and the 49ers haven't played them once yet. Overall, the teams that you thought would be tougher are now not seeming as tough matchups and then when you factor in home field advantage and the way that the 49er fans travel, it does seem like it might be a bit of a favorable schedule. Now, that's also what worries me a little bit because the 49ers tend to beat themselves in games that we expect them to win. So, as long as they can minimize those mistakes, mitigate the issues that they've had in the past this year, and really start to execute more consistently because they've been able to rep it more and because they've been able to kind of get some tread under the legs, I do think that the second half is favorable, which is why I still anticipate them to win the division and make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and one thing about the guys that they're getting back, they're not only impactful players on the team, right? Ark Armstead is a very vocal leader on the team. Jimmie Ward coming back, another vocal. Obviously, Fred Warner had, I think, his best game of the season last week as well. Very. There's one thing to just get players back, but players that actually impact their play, but also with their leadership, I think can help mitigate some of those issues when it comes down. And you're having guys like Armstead, guys like Jimmie Ward, guys like Jason coming in pretty much like needing to prove themselves in their own. There's enough of this new wave of healthy players that aren't going to be just like resting on their laurels because they have games and they want to be out there, they want to play and you know, we know the 49ers play off of that energy, play off of that emotion when they're having fun and guys are in plays. It really energizes the rest of the team, and I think that some of the guys to do that, so it can help mitigate some of that lull that you're talking. Don't execute, and they kind of play down to their level of opponent.
No, I do agree. I think so, and that is an important factor, and maybe that's where you do benefit when that leadership does come back. Real quick, Niner Gang Wolfcast says, still definitely want an outside corner. And this kind of leads me to one of the questions that I had. And I was going to ask you about the issues at cornerback. And what do I mean by that? Well, Jason Verrett is a integral part right now of the 49ers roster because when Emmanuel Mosley went down, the 49ers were confident that they had the insurance on their roster from the offseason in Jason Verrett. Now, Jason Verrett has not suited up for the 49ers yet. We don't know when he will next. Hopefully, it was going to be in this first game after the bye because obviously the 49ers did play on turf in week 8. Do the 49ers have issues at cornerback right now? And are you at all concerned about the health of Jason Verrett?
I mean, first to answer your questions, do they have issues at quarterback? I mean, it does look a lot thinner, and Verrett still not being able to play than it looked at the beginning of the season when we thought a lot earlier. But I do think that Verrett was always scheduled to come back after the bye week. After the bye week, we can really tell whether or not the cornerbacks are going to. But I also think the cornerbacks level of play was a little, defensive line was a lot more shaky. So I think that if the 49ers defensive line could get back to the level capable of, I think that'll also help out the secondary overall. they were able to get a lot more to intercept balls and be disruptive because the quarterback didn't have much time. Something that the 49ers haven't been able to replicate consistently. The quarterbacks have been able to have two in the beginning of the game when the Rams were going down the field. Those first two drives where they were to score. Matt Stafford had so much time, and we were like looking at it, being like, dude, like nobody's seen that happen against Kansas City. And you know, a lot of their other losses, they just weren't able to get to the defensive line with guys like Willis, guys like Armstead coming back that could help feed that was fresh players on the defensive line. They could, you know, create a pass rush. And hey, we got into D'Amico Ryan's like, bro, you got to get back to having that pass rush be effective. It hasn't been. If that pass rush gets back to where it needs, I'm not too worried about I think Lenoir can play well enough. I think Womack can play well enough. And I do believe Verrett's going to come back close to being healthy. We got another elite corner to match up with Mooney Ward.
Yeah, I do think a good part of the 49ers season is somewhat contingent on the health of Jason Verrett. What do I mean by that? I mean, we've seen how cornerbacks are being targeted when it's not one of the top two cornerbacks for the 49ers. The Rams implemented a different system, but this Rams game, in my opinion, I don't look that closely at it. Why? They don't have a good offensive line. They have a bottom 10 offensive line or maybe a bottom 12 offensive line in the NFL. And that's why they implemented the strategy that they did against this top defensive line. They had to get the ball out quick. They couldn't target that one player. And also, it's a Cooper Kupp feed fest. They don't really target options outside of Cooper Kupp, right? Cooper Kupp gets 10, 12, 14 targets a game. That's where they go, be it in the screen game, be it in the deep game, be it on shallow routes, be it on crosser routes, whatever it may be. That's where they're looking to go. But on other offenses with balanced approaches, the 49ers were targeted at that outside cornerback 2 position, whether it was Deommodore Lenoir, whether it was Ambry Thomas in the few snaps that he came in, whoever it was. Atlanta targeted him. You saw Samuel Womack get beat on that touchdown to Kyle Pitts. Then Kansas City targeted him in week 7. You're going to see more and more of that if Verrett is not going to be healthy with stronger offensive lines. And when you get into the playoffs, that's what you're going to face, stronger offensive lines. So that's where the concern to me comes from. And it also puts Deommodore Lenoir, in my opinion, out of position. Lenoir has been good as a slot corner this year, has been burnt a couple of times, but fairly solid as a slot corner where he's used his physicality to be able to neutralize players at the line of scrimmage and tackle well. And Verrett can be a good outside corner. But if that's not the case, you might see more Jimmie Ward out of position in the slot, where at least right now he's being neutralized because he has that hand issue, which doesn't allow him to jam players to the line of scrimmage. So to me, the best scenario for the 49ers is definitely Ward on the outside. And I do think that there are serious concerns if he isn't able to come for the 49ers to make that full push.
I mean, I still think it's more defensive line than corner, Rohan. If this defensive line is going to continue to not be able to be one of the top, I don't think it depends. I don't think even if Mosley was back there, it's tough for any corner to guard the level of talent if the 49ers are giving these high level quarterbacks as much. So I think you could blame it on guys like Lenoir. You could blame it on guys like them as much as I blame the defensive line and their inability to consistently get a pass rush.
I think that could be an issue, obviously, because the 49ers have been predicated on that defensive line, and that in itself is required on the health of guys like Ark Armstead, who, if they are brought back, that will be a key part for the 49ers, because Armstead provides a lot, not only in pass rushing, but also as a run stopper. And when you look at just the ripple effect, if Armstead's in the game, you have a better option of stopping the run shorter distance. 2nd and 8 as opposed to 2nd and 6. 3rd and 7 as opposed to 3rd and 5. That creates more dire passing situations where the defensive line then can hit on those 3rd downs, creating what you're saying, that pressure that's needed on 3rd downs to keep the defense off the field. So I do think it all reiterates back to health. That's where the 49ers need to be at full strength. both with the Verrett, but also with Armstead.
Sure. And I mean, I think that Ward and Mosley defensive line and playing well in the beginning half before Armstead went down. Even Mooney Ward hasn't had the same type of dominant games earlier in the season as that pass rush stopped becoming more as that pass rush is effective. So I think it's a product of the pass rush being less effective ability to generate a pass rush with his schemes or blitzes or whatever it was, talent that's there. Because do we think Mooney Ward isn't talented? Obviously, we think he's the league, but he's been looking pretty pedestrian as well, Rohan. If we're being honest, as far as pull occasions, quarterbacks aren't afraid to throw his way that much time, right? It's hard for any corner, no matter what your talent level is, these wide receivers when they have 5-6 seconds to be able to throw the ball. It's just no matter your talent level to be able to sustain that.
Yeah, no, definitely. But talking real quick about that defensive secondary, pretty much, we talked about the importance of health. Now, one player that has been playing out of position because of that lack of health has been Jimmie Ward. We've seen him in the nickel. He has been all right in the nickel, but there have been issues, and he himself has probably expressed a preference to play free safety. Now, do you still believe that we should play Jimmie Ward in the nickel? Because I've seen takes like from my guy Jack, who has said if Jimmie Ward doesn't want to play in the nickel, they should bench him. Do you think the 49ers should continue to play Jimmie Ward in the nickel, or do you think they should relegate him back to free safety?
This is tough. It's more about the love of Jimmie Ward as a player and as as the longest, maybe more than what he's bringing as far as on the field, right? Because as Rohan, we didn't really miss Jimmie Ward at all in the second out, right? He's only played a couple games, and I think that the combination of Hufanga and Gibb pretty good, as far as back there. So I'm more of a sign that the 49ers done, which be given more an extension. I don't know what his contract things are. You know that more than I don't know how much more money he has guaranteed moving forward. But as far as where I would like to see him play, I don't know. Is he better than Gibson at this point? As far as experience level, you would have to give that to Jim. We haven't seen him play. We don't know what he's capable of. He's still not healthy. He obviously has a club on his hand. Seen Gibson be very effective this whole season, and so it's tough. You would like to see have as many of your playmakers on the field at all time. Try to get Jimmie Ward there as a nickel, but like you said, he hasn't been effective as a nickel either. So I don't know how to answer your question, Rohan, but
okay.
I think he's gonna be the odd man.
To me personally, I would 100% play him at free safety. Last week, I talked about this a little bit. I don't like the idea of Jimmie Ward playing the nickel specifically right now because of the club. Jimmie Ward's best characteristic when playing coverage is his ability to neutralize players at the line of scrimmage. He's a physical player that has great hand placement that doesn't allow players to get off their releases, get back behind him in the line of scrimmage. That's how he's been able to hold tight ends to 50 yards a game, 30 yards a game, because he's able to neutralize them, at which point the defensive line is able to come home within 3 to 4 seconds and they can't get their route off. And so the quarterback is stumbled when looking for that tight end over the middle of the field. But to me, Jimmie Ward should be playing free safety. And the argument that you brought up with Deshaun Gibson, I personally disagree with that. I don't think Gibson has been playing as well as many fans and many people think. I think that although he had a good stretch in the beginning of the year, I do think that play has waned a little bit over the last couple of games, and I don't think that he's this top 10 safety that PFF puts him out to be. I don't know what his grade is right now, but I don't think he's of that caliber. I think Gibson is an all right player, but I still think the 49ers would be best served if Jimmie Ward plays at free safety. I think the best lineup of safeties that you could utilize is playing Hufanga in the base linebacker position while having Gibson and having Jimmie Ward out there as the safeties, as in a 3 safety rotation in the deep end. Jimmie Ward right now, his best talent and pretty much his best trait is his instincts and his mental makeup, because he doesn't have the ability to intercept passes with a broken arm, at least unless he does it with one hand. He doesn't have the ability to jam players to the line of scrimmage, which allows other players to just utilize their speed to get past him. We saw him give up a touchdown in the Chiefs game. And so to me, I think he's a liability if he's continuously placed at corner because teams can scheme around it. I think he's much better off at free safety. And you got, in my opinion, you got to play your best players where your best players are most comfortable. Jimmie Ward, I understand, he is limited right now with that injury, but I do think that he is a better free safety than Tashaun Gibson, regardless of what Tashaun Gibson has put out this year. And I think that the best way to get him to play at the level that he can play at is playing him where he's most comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, that thought process. Obviously, if I'm choosing Jimmie Ward to play, you got to say free safety. I guess the question is Jimmie Ward a better free safety career with the club than Tashaun Gibson? You say yes. I think there's a low at this point because of of just not being able to see it. Right? Jimmie Ward hasn't lined up at free safety, and he's like wowed us. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, how much leeway do you give based off of what he's done and him being a fan favorite and all that kind of stuff? Is he the best? Obviously, obviously based off of experience and pedigree, but that might not be the reality anymore, Rohan. And I guess that's up for to decide when they see these guys in practice week after week, and one way more than the other.
I think that that's true. Like, we don't see how they practice, so we have to we don't really get that understanding. That's just my personal opinion of what should happen on game day. But once again, let's flip to the other side of the field, because the most electric part of the 49ers was showcased last weekend. Christian McCaffrey, the guy who had the triple crown, the touchdown pass, the touchdown catch, the touchdown run. Now we're going to get to see extensive action probably of him and Deebo Samuel, because Deebo Samuel's expected to probably return from his hamstring injury sometime soon. What are you expecting from the new look offense with both weapons being utilized, potentially even out of the backfield?
I don't to be used out of the backfield. I think that CMC ends back. I think Deebo goes to strictly being a wide receiver, being able to get to mid-range receiver routes, the receiver screens, the kind of plays, timing plays that give him the opportunity to get, but CMC is a better wide back than Deebo is. That's the truth, and we just saw him, and so I think that what Deebo do for each other is keep them a lot more fresh. Like CMC got the Rams. You don't want to see that too much because that's where he started being with Carolina, when his usage rate just went really, really high. He wasn't there, was getting a lot of touches. And then that was leading to Deebo having, like that. So I think that CMC and Deebo together are going to give them the opportunity for the 49ers to still always have an explosive play, without needing to feed the ball to either of them at the usage rate when they were injury prone. So I think it's going to extend the health of both of those players. And it's opportunistic because both of those players are under contract for the next years. So you want to keep them healthy, explosive, and being able to wow. And I think that's what the main thing we're going to see out of that combination.
I think that there could be honestly some action of Deebo Samuel in the wide back role. And I don't know how many carries necessarily Deebo Samuel will get, but what do I mean by that? The 49ers were going to use a zone read type of scheme with with Trey Lance. Definitely not Jimmy Garoppolo. If Jimmy Garoppolo does a zone read scheme, oh boy. But they were going to use a zone read scheme with Trey Lance and whoever the running back was at the beginning of the year. Why? Because it gave him multiple options and forced the defense to think where the ball was going on any given carry. With Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, it forces defenses to do the same when both are out of the backfield, although there is a little wrinkle with Jimmy Garoppolo obviously not being a rushing threat. Now, even if Deebo Samuel is not used as a rushing threat, the reason I would like to see both out of the backfield, defenses and offenses match up because of personnel. So if a team is in 21 personnel, the opposing defense is going to place their base package out there. What does this mean? When Trey Lance, oh my God, I keep misspeaking with names. Let's get Trey Lance out of my mind. When Jimmy Garoppolo is lining up with Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey, and there's linebackers on the opposite side of the field, it almost assuredly places a linebacker on one of San Francisco's top skill position players who are both able to pretty much scheme themselves free when matched up against linebackers, and that's a positive for the 49ers. I do think they're going to run different packages to get favorable matchups. This is what Kyle Shanahan is going to be able to get creative out of, and we saw a little bit out of it when Jeff Wilson was in as the fullback last week. We see a little bit out of it when Kyle Juszczyk is able to be utilized both in the slot and out of the backfield. I just think it's another opportunity for Kyle Shanahan to use, but also, like I said, when players are coming back healthy, it decreases the margin of error the 49ers have with such talent on the field.
You think decreases?
So what I meant is not margin of error, margin of excuse.
Okay.
Because you got to perform. Yeah.
Look, definitely with this team has no more excuses because even when Deebo's out, you still have multiple all you have on the field and Pro Bowl caliber players that you have on the field. So I think that there's no excuses right now at all. This team needs to make the play, win, one or two playoff games and compete in for the NFC. There's no excuses. Injury is nothing. Like one of these guys go down, you still have 2 or 3 all pros at every level. You have an all pro at running back in CMC. You have an all pro at fullback in pro and Kittle, in tight end with Kittle, and you have an all pro at left tackle with Trent, and then the other guys are Brandon Ayuk, super talented players that we know could be super impactful. So lowering the excuse radars at 0, Rohan, and we need to hold these coaches and this team to those standard excuses. There's no other team that has that abundance of talent. Obviously you would maybe a quarterback that gives you a little bit higher ceiling, but be able to mess this up. Jimmie is capable and qualified and has shown well enough for this team to win. And no, I don't know of a quarterback in the league right now that has around him. It should be enough for this team to compete with any team in the league.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like you said, the talent's there. You can compete with any team in the league. The 49ers, though, have proven they can lose to any team in the league, too. You've lost to the Chicago Bears, you've lost to the Falcons, and you've lost to the Denver Broncos. So they can lose to any team in the league as well, which is why I think this the second half of the season is going to be polarizing. One last question before we head out. This is an intriguing question from Sacktown, or comment from Sacktown Izzy. I said it myself. The 49ers are going to win the division. What do you think? How do you think the division plays out for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, I still feel the 49ers can go 5-1, possibly even 6-0. And I don't really see a team that, we've already beat Seattle and better. Since we've played Seattle with the addition of CMC, that could definitely be another W for the 49ers. Arizona, they obviously, D-Hop there, who's playing, out of his mind. But I think that defense is one of those defenses that allows a lot of points. And I haven't had a caliber of corner like Mooney Ward to be able to put up against a guy like Verrett's healthy as well. I think that makes it extremely difficult for Arizona consistently score. Obviously, how to defend a mobile quarterback, but I do think that the Cardinals, with their ability to score points now with CMC there, so I expect them to be first split, but even sweep. I think this team is capable of decision and easily making the playoffs with that.
There you go. He said we're easily making the playoffs, and I think that's the perfect way to end off the show. 49ers are going to make the playoffs, according to Suneil and Rohan. We're going to catch you guys sometime soon. Suneil obviously very busy with his trips, but we make it work. I'm also busy with school, but we have it fun, and thank you guys all for tuning in today on this Wednesday on short notice. Great show, as always, Suneil, and I want you to lead the intro or the outro today.
So like we always say, stay safe,
stay hydrated,
and have a very beautiful night. Bang, 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 Niners gang.